This is day 2 of the January 89 7-day retreat. I want to say a few words about discouragement. And also that thought that comes to everyone at least once during a retreat, maybe more than once, which is, what am I doing here? Why am I here? I don't mean in an exploratory way, but sort of in a discouraged or exasperated way. When that thought / feeling comes up that one calls discouragement, that one labels discouragement, what is it really? Can one approach it that way when whatever feeling comes up? We don't approach it that way normally. We get caught up in our moods, which are very often triggered by thoughts about what is happening, and the thoughts have weight and association with the whole physical organism system. I feel this way, I feel that way, I'm this or that, and then whoom, the mood, the feeling, the emotion, the depression or elation that the body immediately manifests as one has described one's condition. Because you could say, wait a minute, I felt this way before I described it. A certain feeling preceded my naming it discouragement. But in that feeling too, if one looks, attends, maybe in retrospect, evokes the very recent memory, there were also thoughts in the first manifestation of this feeling of discouragement. And what are those thoughts? What is involved in this complex state of discouragement? And is one asking that question in order to get rid of it or in order to explore it? To find out about it as a state which occurs so often in our life and has occurred throughout our life, starting at the very earliest age as discouragement over something. What is involved in it? Why do we get discouraged? Actually, very small children, something doesn't work out, there may be some fussing or dropping the thing, but usually a child will plod along trying to do this thing of building up a house of blocks. It falls over. This past Christmas, our little granddaughter spent almost an hour with little blocks. Kyle was sitting there with her. He didn't say a thing. He was just there. He didn't praise her or gush over her. He was just there. And she was walking around that little table. She had to move while she was doing it. It wasn't just standing there, transfixed and putting these things, moving to this side, that side, trying to reach over from farm, putting another block on top, and the thing would fall over, and she'd start. It wasn't discouraging. This was part of it. So why do we get discouraged? What is involved in it? And why do we want to get rid of it rather than explore it? It feels unpleasant and we want to be rid of anything that's unpleasant. Something feels good, we don't want to get rid of it. We don't want to explore it either. But we want to have that and to have more of that. In exploring it together this morning with someone, the person said it does have to do with expectation, doesn't it? And it does. One expects to feel in a certain way. By now, after so and so many hours, days, weeks, months, years of sitting, one expects to have a certain state or facility or energy or clarity. And it isn't there. And that's discouraging because we're programmed to think that if something we want or expect to be there isn't there, then there is a feeling of failure, being no good. It's all old stuff, ancient, manifesting again afresh this instant. So can one shed fresh light onto this fresh state and not have it link up with the infinite past to see very clearly what one wants and it isn't there, and the labeling oneself failure or comparing oneself either with others whom one think are doing better, or comparing with oneself with how one remembers one felt other times where it was so good, so glorious, so exciting or elating. Also the expectation that any kind of state that one has once experienced should have lasted or should come back at any time, for longer, for good. Let's examine all of these expectations, and can one put them to rest? Because they affect us in very definite and unpleasant ways. Let us suppose this instant one didn't expect anything. There were no expectations, or as one arises in the mind on this inner screen, I should feel this way, one sees it as a habitual thought process, not as a real admonition of something that should really take place. One just sees what happens and isn't roped in by it. Then what is this present state? This instant of sitting, listening, feeling, sensing, thoughts and so forth. What is there to get either excited over or discouraged over? As the warmth of the sunshine and the birds, sounds in the room, certain feelings in the body, can one be in touch with them, aware of them? Maybe a feeling one may call tension, but what it is it really if I don't call it tension? Tension already blurs out what something feels like if I think it's tension, because I already have a negative attitude toward it. And the idea I shouldn't be tense. And discouragement that I'm still tense after all of these years of sitting, or whatever goes on in the mind. Can there be an interest in what we do to ourselves from moment to moment? What thoughts do to the body? What the body does in evoking thoughts? To be really become intimate with this whole network of functioning in thought, feeling, emotions. Just to see it, view it, with no expectation that it should be otherwise, with no will to change it or to suppress it, or desire to prolong it. That's all extra and causes extra complications. One person who mentioned this also discouraging thought, what am I doing here? Person said, I want to be aware, instead I'm falling asleep. That's what one is doing that moment. That's what's happening. One is falling asleep. What's bad about it? What's good about it? What's wrong or right about it? Just because there's a dozing quality to the mind doesn't mean there can't be attention, awareness of that. Of course, one can ask further, why is there this feeling of sleepiness? Is it that one hasn't slept well the night before, which is usually what happens at the beginning of retreat? Or the person said that usually at retreat, she can't sleep very well. The mind is too active, there's too much energy. Or does one not want to look what's going on? One is disappointed, discouraged, and then sleep becomes one of our favorite escapes, to try to doze out of the whole situation. Zip the sleeping bag over the head and be out of it for a while. Is that what's going on? One can ask these questions and then listen. Not say this is so, or somebody says this is what it must be with me. That's what we usually do. We thumb around in books about our condition. What does some expert say the symptoms point to? Or we ask somebody, what does this mean when I feel like that? Why doesn't one find out for oneself what it means? Whether it is so. One asks oneself a question and then listens. And the body-mind will respond. Yes, this is so, or no, it isn't so, or I don't know. So if one is really tired, rather than feeling discouraged over it, why not go to bed? There's nothing wrong with going to bed just because there's bright sunshine outside. That's the beauty of a retreat. We don't need to worry about conventional time and the idea of what should be done at daytime or at nighttime. One is tired and can sleep, it's marvelous to give the body, the nervous system, everything a break, a rest, a relaxation. If one cannot sleep, one lies down on the mattress and one cannot sleep, why cannot one be lying there if it feels more comfortable, less stressful to the body? Lie there and listen. Feel. Look inwardly. It's not restricted to sitting upright on a square brown mat. Actually, if one cannot sleep at night and just lies there relaxing the body, meaning feeling whatever tension there is in a benign way, not trying to get rid of it, but just feeling it, then that tension usually has a way of relaxing because it's not acted upon nervously or anxiously. And then just lying at night or daytime, one cannot sleep, but the body is prone, not trying to keep any kind of a position or posture. And then just listening to this body, mind, and everything that's going on around it in a natural way, not in order to gain something for oneself, but just being there as everything is there. Then that time doesn't count for lost sleep. It may be more beneficial to the system and if one tosses in a sleep with heavy dreams and wakes up more tired than one was before. Can one experiment with all of that? Interestedly and awarely. We're so burdened with what we should be doing and should not be doing. But we needn't be. We can see this for thought, for ancient, conditioned, imprinted thought with its effects. And just see it happening, but not be caught up in it, under the spell of it. Also, and we mentioned that this morning, a thought, feeling, physical and mental that has been taking place and lasted maybe until the moment one comes into a meeting room, talks about it, or becomes really fully aware of it while sitting in here. There's no reason for it to continue. We have this feeling something that's awful is going to be there forever. Difficult to bear. I will have to be with this for the rest of my life. These thoughts prolong and give energy to the states that we find ourselves in. How do we know? We don't know what the next moment is. We don't even know what this moment is if we look at it without idea. It's such a challenge to be here now without knowing what it is. And with that we come to the next topic, which was asked, what really do you mean by not knowing? You said something about it in the opening talk, and it didn't come quite clear for me. What is this not knowing? First of all, let's say it's not a state to be attained or to be hoped or worked toward or wanted. Then the whole thing is just what we were talking about. I would like to be in a state of not knowing, but all that's there is knowing about it and then the discouragement. Not knowing is the same as wondering, questioning what something is. With the mind not immediately saying, it's this, it's that. And it does that. It does immediately say it's this or that. So can that be seen? Heard on this inner talking board. We can hear ourselves talking to ourselves about ourselves and about the world and about other people. There's a almost constant inner dialogue, monologue, comment going on, and one can listen to that, sort of listen in on it to see what the mind is up to, what it is that causes all of our different feelings. So, the name comes so quickly. A bird is heard, and that's a bird, says the brain. Or a jay, if one is into birds and wants to name them and know and visualize what it is that is flying out there and making these sounds. But then one can listen again, does one realize that the image of this bird flying around there and the name bird or jay is not what is right now received. heard. The word someone breathing or someone moving, these words, breathing, moving, are not the actuality of what is being perceived, is it? It's clear, isn't it? So, what is the actuality of perception? Saying, I can feel a certain tension in my knees, or a pain in my back, or a stress on my chest. These are words. Remembered words, and they may have imagery with them. A picture of oneself as having this tension. Picture of the right knee in the mind. And the idea of pain and all what is connected with it is not what is actually happening here. The word, sound of a wooden chair is not what we just perceived. So, is there some curiosity aroused to find out what is real without this constant imprinting of words or enveloping of an occurrence into words and description? Because as long as I have the word, I know. And over the years we have learned to stick with the word and what we know and forget about what it is that we actually hear. But the word has become much, much more important. And knowing about it and being able to say it and comment upon it. And this is how a new world has arisen, in which we move, the world of words and ideas and memories. Blocking out the world, the universe of reality. And is one interested to find out what the world is like outside of that house, outside of that structure, that enclosure of words and memories and ideas? It's quite clear, isn't it, that if I want to really hear, feel, see what's going on, knowing is in the way. Knowing the word, albeit the word has come up, so let's see it. It's a word that came up on the screen, but it isn't what is heard or seen or felt. What is that? I don't know. It's happening right now, and the word isn't that. So what is it? It's so interesting to be with little children again, a little child who's just beginning to accumulate rapidly vocabulary. That's fun, it's a game, it's enormous joy. Every morning when I was brushing my teeth, Adie would come in the same way. She had learned a way of climbing on the toilet, putting the toilet seat down, climbing on that, then moving something aside on the, what do you call it, the tank in back of the toilet, and sitting on there. And it was after she had found that way, she did it that same way every day. And then leaning forward, and what you doing, Grandma? Brushing my teeth. Why are you doing that? And then the floss, she hadn't seen floss. What's that? Flossing. What's that? Flossing. Flossing, she'd say. And the next day, what are you doing? She remembered it. But it was fun to use words like these big people do. And also, it was communication between us. There was something going on. Sometimes when she'd climb on my lap and talk with me, and I'd sometimes talk to somebody else, she'd take my face and turn it toward her. Don't talk to Mom, she'd say. And what's your name, Grandma? She would say. Say what my name is. And what's your last name? Packer. No, that's not your last name. Then I talked to someone, Jane would ask something, and she'd turn that face around again. There's so much going on, isn't there? This wanting to be seen, held, talked to with words. Of course, there was a physical contact too. But the word learning was a fun game. She was probably seeing what I was doing there. She was looking at that, at the flossing. It was something she had never seen before. And she was very attentive to it. Children are, because they don't have all of these words yet and ideas that this is something crazy or right or wrong, good for your teeth. So here, from big eyes, and most of the little children, we talked about it before, have such big eyes. Later on, they begin to close, becomes more squinty for most people, because there's tension around the eyes, wanting to see, afraid of seeing. But little children who grow up in a relatively secure, protective environment don't have to be afraid yet. Happens very quickly that they have to be afraid. So these eyes take in everything. And then there's the possibility of getting a word for something. It must be a tremendous thing. A feeling of power, maybe. Having a new tool to evoke things in oneself and in the other. And of course the praise and enjoyment that adults feel if children express things and know things. She said another word. So there's a lot of pleasure and reward, praise, attention connected with saying words, knowing words. And of course the great helpfulness in communicating with each other. Not having to every time be burnt by something or hurt by something. One knows now. One remembers the memory image, a very helpful function in not doing things that are painful over and over. Memory helps to prevent that. But with that initial burst of joy and power and energy, attention that one gets through learning words, comes the enclosure into words and knowledge, where it has no function at all, where it blinds us and encases us, separates us from this living world of reality, of realness. So, not knowing is wondering what something is, if the realization is there that the word is just a word, and limited, fragmented, just a very, very small part, and not what it refers to, what it describes. Then isn't there interest to find out what is another human being, what is a tree, or a bird, or snow, coldness or heat, pain or discouragement? When I'll let go of the word, it's come up, but I won't go for it. I want to find out directly what something is this instant. If there's this interest and the energy that comes with it, then the mind may not know, but hear, feel, and touch directly, without a feeling of separation. Because the separation, as we went into yesterday, emerges when I say I feel, I hear, I don't like what I feel, or I love what I see. Then there is created that separate feeler or observer, thinker. And again, a veil, because the thinker and the experiencer becomes the important element this moment. The observer, how well I observe, or how poorly I observe. And not what is there. He was brought up again this morning, or last night, I don't know. How can there be this being in touch with each other out of quietness, out of a stillness? We talked about it yesterday. How can there be this being in touch with each other, or with the woods, the path that one hikes up the hill, the sky and clouds? Out of stillness, out of quietness, if one is so busy. There's so much to do, so much depending on one, so much responsibility, so many projects. Then is it impossible to be in touch with silence and see and feel and communicate with each other out of touch with that? So one has to look again, freshly, not again. Again means according to an old pattern. In being with someone, maybe in retreat it's easier, we don't talk with each other in the kitchen, in the storeroom, or in walking up the hill and the trees, maybe some deer in the woods. What is the state of the mind? And body. Body is always included in the state of the mind. What is the state of the mind? Is there some space in the mind? Because it's very simple. It's there. When the mind is spacious and open, then there are the clouds and the snow and the brown grasses, the twigs of trees, and the person right next to one. It's there. Not as this or that, but there. Alive, breathing. So what crams and crowds out the space normally as we live, as we have been living? Isn't it always being so full of oneself, so full of one's worries about oneself, about others, one's fears, one's anger, one's demands, one's feeling so sorry for oneself, feeling victimized, sacrificed. This being full with oneself, of oneself, prevents the being in touch with each other. when that goes on, it's just like 1,000 people in a little room, demanding, shoving, wanting, fearing, angry. No space. So can that concern with oneself empty out in seeing it, in being aware of it kindly, not with a vengeance or with the intention of emptying it out? Because the self can't empty itself out. It remains as the emptier and then feels glorious or successful. And immediately the same thing starts over again. It's this awareness we talked about yesterday on the very first day, which has no self-center. It just sheds light. If shedding light is too dangerous a word, so one expects shafts of light in the mind, or to see that it just means seeing something, seeing worry, anger, resentment, self-pity. And it can be seen. One can become aware of it, that one feels sorry for oneself. It's not so hard. At that moment, is there immediately a justification? I have a right to feel this way, and the insight is lost. Or, and the ending of it doesn't have to go on with anything. If the body has become very involved in it, then the body will continue with certain manifestations, symptoms. But one can be aware of those. There's no obstruction in that. It may not be pleasant, but unpleasantness is not a hindrance. It's just what is. And if one doesn't call it unpleasantness, then it isn't half as bad. But the thought, too bad for myself or what I have to suffer, that can end instantly. And with that ending, not evoke further turmoil in the body, so that the body has rest from further thought to come to balance again. In walking around, I was thinking of someone's question, where does one keep the mind and walking? Does one get one with the feet? Or so we have been told this for so many years. Get one with this, get one with that. But who is there to get one with? It's when there's no one there that the walking is perceived freely, vividly, alively. The mind doesn't have to be on anything. When it's on nothing, then everything is there. This is not something to be remembered or as a truth, but to be seen for oneself. That the mind has not to go through any effort to be one with anything. There just needs to be clarity of what's going on, self-concern or self-pity or just our gossipy way of being with people, thinking what is he or she up to, and ending it, because there's awareness and there can be the ending of that. And then all of a sudden there's the floor and the feet and the change of light going from one room to the other. People in front, people in back, the whole thing is there. One doesn't have to be one with it. That's an idea. But what's there, the footsteps, the people, the light, the warmth and cold breeze from the window, that's not idea, that's not thought. In expressing it right now in this talk, I'm using words. But the word, fresh air from an open window, is not the real thing. The word is not the real thing. So the next time the thought comes up, what am I doing here? Make it a real question, not just a rhetorical question. What am I doing? What is going on this moment? And listen. Not to what I should be doing, being attentive, but to what's actually going on. And not get stuck with any one thing. Because there's always so much more. The quieter the mind gets in listening and not knowing, the more expansive it all gets. There just seems to be no end to quiet space. Or to the quieting of everything. And no force in it. That's not quietness. Just listening without going for the word. We will end here for today.